guest Lacey in the back with the headphones on. It was special for me to meet Lacey and her mother because it reminded me a lot, now years and years and years ago, from the time period when I served as the chair of the Kansas Republican Party. My own daughter, Lacey's 4, right? My own daughter, Madison, was 4 years old. She's now 14 when I was the state chair. And often, Madison and Dylan would travel with me when I went to these sorts of events. I'm really grateful to all of you because I think that you represent the best of the party and the heart of our party. And I love when I see mothers and kids who come out to these events. So Lacey, thank you for coming. This location for me is also really special. Wyandotte County is really special because a lot of my professional career where I've invested my time centers right around in this area. So as a businesswoman, I think you all know I've spent 15 years at Cerner Corporation in the Kansas City community, so I've done work in healthcare here in KC and all across America. And there's a Cerner building right across the street, about 4,000 jobs here in Wyandotte County. So and I was really, really happy to see that growth a number of years ago. In addition to that, as just east of here, the reference that I made to doing work for at-risk kids and families, we have invested, the organization I started called Systems of Care Initiative has invested in about 80 3- and 4-year-old children right here in Wyandotte County to make sure that they can be ready for kindergarten in this community. And not just that, but so that they can ultimately be prepared for life. So it's really personal for me to be here today with all of you because I value your organization and because this community right here in Wyandotte County has been an important part of my history. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Okay, thank you very much. I set my timer and then I screwed it up, so that I knew somebody else should do this. All right, so when it gets close to the 2 minutes, I'm going to show you the back of my paper. Okay, yellow caution.
I got the code.
I was like, maybe A+. I'll take that. All right, so, Adrienne.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I am Adrienne Vallejo Foster, and I want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm super excited to be back home. My campaign is about family, faith, and freedom, and I was just, this is my first time, oh my gosh, it was like, thank you. It's right outside this building. I came in, I was like, hey, do you got a t-shirt that's red that says family, faith, and freedom? They're like, well, look right now. I was like, okay. So it was really pretty darn cool to see that, you know, everyone that does know me, I'll tell you, this is ingrained in me. This is who I am and what I stand for. So it's just not a campaign slogan. My grandparents, many of you guys know this, immigrated here from Mexico in the early 1900s. That's where a lot of our Hispanic population came from, here in Kansas. They came through the railroad. They started off, when the railroad brought them over, they knew that they were fleeing the Mexican Revolution. And they went to Horton, Kansas. How many people know where Horton, Kansas is, right? Okay. So Horton, Kansas, then the railroad continued to grow, and it came and stopped in Kansas City, Kansas, and then went on to Rock Island, Illinois. And so I was born and raised in Providence, St. Margaret's, which you all probably now know as Donley College. That used to be Providence, St. Margaret's. And I lived off 10th and Central, 912 Riverview. I still remember my home phone number. I don't know how I remember that, but I still do. And I was the youngest of 12 children, and we lived in a 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And when I say bath, it was a bathtub. It wasn't a shower. I didn't take my first shower, this is probably TMI, but we're all ladies here, and I know there's a few gentlemen, but until I went to college. And I had to ask my sorority sisters, how does this thing work? I seen it on television, true story, and they were like, are you kidding me? And I was like, no, because we never stayed in a hotel. That wasn't anything we did. So as you can imagine, 12 children, but my dad worked for the railroad right off 10th Street, and it had several names. My mom, many of you guys know, and as my mother, and my mom and this lady right here worked together and were pregnant together. When my mom worked for Security Bank, my mom started working a year before I was conceived, and her daughter and I were born at the same time. So, oh my gosh, 15 seconds already.
Yeah.
Okay, so, holy cow, I didn't realize that. Okay, so I have state, local, and federal government experience. I'd love to talk to you more about that. We'll talk more about that. I want to respect your time, and so thank you for having me.
We moved the timer back there so you can see.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Senator, great comments about the farm team. We need a farm team. Right now, we're getting our clocks twinged by the Democrats in these nonpartisan races. You go up north of 435, these nonpartisan city council races, the Johnson County Community College trustees, the water boards. We as Republicans are losing. The comments about a farm team are very well taken, and it takes leadership and it takes some money. But right now, Main Street's under a big attack. Everybody that's essential government is still getting their paychecks. Main Street's getting crushed right now, and that's where Republicans get a lot of their money to support some of these races that we need to. So we need to take a very, very close look at that as Republicans and figure out what we're going to do. So I was enjoying retirement. I'm 61 years old. I retired about a year and a half ago. We're watching, my wife and I are both politicos. Married my wife. Shout out to the University of Arizona. We have an Arizona grad in here as well. My wife and I were college sweethearts. We were engaged to be married our entire senior year. Graduated on Saturday, got married on Monday. 2 weeks later, we're done. Income, no kids, living the dream. 5 months later, we're pregnant. 25-year road. And we have 4 adult children and some delightful grandchildren. Somebody goes, Mike, in your newspaper, you say you have delightful grandchildren, some delightful grandchildren. Does that mean some aren't so delightful? No, ma'am, they're all delightful. It's just this race against AOC-KC is going to be intense. It's going to be very, very tough. It's going to be vitriolic. It's going to be very challenging. And I'm protecting my children and my grandchildren. You don't see them in my paper. You don't hear me talk about them a whole lot because I'm protecting my children and grandchildren from what I know is going to come. Anyway, so we're watching the impeachment of the president, and then he gets acquitted. And darn if those Democrats just don't come back and say, well, we'll just find something else to impeach him on. I turned to my wife, I said, I'm going to run for United States Congress. At the time, pre-COVID, we were going to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. I'm an engineer. I've been building infrastructure for 40 years. I thought, boy, that matches great with the world-class engineering companies that we have right here in this Kansas City area. I can list a dozen of them. Now, post-COVID, down 300,000 jobs, down 40 million jobs that in the country. We need jobs, jobs, jobs more than ever before. And I'm the jobs creator. I was very successful at Burns McDonnell because I was able to travel all over the country, creating thousands of jobs across America and right here in Kansas. That's what we need. That's what the district needs. That's how we're going to beat AOC-KC. Okay, this election, mark my words, is coming down to socialism, as we're seeing on television right now, versus free market capitalism. AOC-KC embodies socialism. She's going to give you free health care, free forgiveness of student loans, free college tuition, free everything. We as Republicans stand for the American dream. My theme is equal opportunity for the American dream. Love to talk with you more.
Sarah.
Thank you, Barb, and thank you, Erin, Roxy, Laurel, for putting this together and bringing us together this afternoon to talk about unseating Sharice Davids. I've been very fortunate, and Missy from my Eisenhower class and Laurel from my Eisenhower class, to be surrounded by some fantastic Republican women. 2 of my big supporters in our efforts to unseat Sharice Davids are the 2 women that we had at the leadership table in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018 before Republicans lost the majority. Congresswoman Kathy McMorris-Rogers, who happens to be a mentor, a dear friend of mine, has a 13-year-old son with Down syndrome. We've worked together over the last 13 years. She has really taken me under her wing in our efforts to defeat Sharice Davids. And many of you also know Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins. Lynn has been a great conservative leader here in the state of Kansas for many years. Lynn Jenkins is also chairing my campaign. This is my home district. This is where I grew up, and I stepped down a year and a half ago as the CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society, really for 2 reasons. This district is not San Francisco, and Sharice Davids is not the leader we need in Washington. We're all gathered here today because we want to defeat Sharice Davids this term, and as Lynn Jenkins will tell you, You defeat a vulnerable Democrat in their first term. And so that's what I'm running to do, and I think we all share that goal. You know, Cherise stands for things like, I call her Socialist Cherise, stands for things like free college, Medicare for all, and just last week her senior staffer advised her to start taxing our churches. I stand for freedom, for capitalism, for our constitutional rights, and our Kansas conservative values. To give you another example of the differences between Cherise and myself, Cherise's two largest funders that are coming into this district are Emily's List and NARAL, and the Democrat Party is treating the 3rd District here in Kansas like it's a square on the Monopoly board that can be bought. And I think that's unacceptable. I've been a pro-life leader my entire career. I was raised Catholic in Olathe. I wrote term papers in high school about overturning Roe versus Wade. I've been one of the only advocates in the disability community to stand up and advocate for a federal and state ban on abortions targeting babies with disabilities. And when Iceland grossly celebrated the fact that it eradicated babies with Down syndrome, I stood up on the international stage and fought that. We already have a congresswoman that you can't find in this district. She's silent on the issues that matter. She hides from voters. She hides from the media. And I want to be the congresswoman that shows up early, works late, and delivers. It's what I've been doing throughout my entire career, and that's what I want to do for you. So thank you again, and I look forward to today's dialogue.
All right, we have a wide range of subjects here today. So the first one is, and it's going to go to Adrienne. If you had to make the decision today whether to continue, modify, or stop the weekly $600 CARES Act payments that are going to unemployed Americans, what would you do and why? And how would your decision both help the country's economic recovery and the individuals harmed by the pandemic?
So that's a great question. In fact, we were just at a forum, and I was asking Roger Marshall's people about this same thing, because there is discussion about possibly extending the $600. We absolutely should not extend that $600. During the COVID time, I was actually doing constituency services that Cherise Davids was not doing. I helped over 241 of our small businesses here in the 3rd Congressional Labor. I know that's not a federal constituency service thing, but because I worked for Governor Brownback for 7.5 years, advising him on Hispanic and Latino affairs, and also working through the Governor's Grants Office and the Department of Commerce, I know how the process works at a state level. And so to be able to work with those businesses and hear those businesses now going, we are open for business, however, the number of people are scared to still come here, but we can't get our employees to come back to work. And because they're making $25 an hour sitting at home, and that must stop. So I am absolutely not for extending that. If we could stop it, it's hard to stop it when you've already told people it's going to end on the end of this month. But I'm a rule follower, so we said it, we can't stop it right now until the end of the month.
Thank you.
Stop it immediately, and we should have never passed it in the first place. That's $2.2 trillion that we printed. That's hugely inflationary, but actually that CARES Act was $6.2 trillion because there was another $4 trillion that was used to prop up the stock market. Why do you think the stock market is going up when we turn on the television and we see streets on fire, and statues being ripped down, and the flag trampled and the Constitution dishonored? And the stock market's going up. Why? It's because we're putting $4 trillion of printed money in. So it's not a $2.2 trillion program, it's a $6.2 trillion. A good, solid, conservative, constitutional conservative congressman would have voted no on that. And you know what the ramifications would have been? That a lot of people that now are getting minimum wage, essentially $15 an hour, you take 600 divided by 40, it's $15 an hour, plus unemployment, and they're staying home because they can make more money at home than they can working tables at Cactus Grill. We just facilitated that. You know, if we hadn't passed that bill, in retrospect, of course, hindsight's always 20/20, right? If we hadn't passed that bill, people would have had an imperative to get back to work. And people would have gone with us up to the governor's office on April 23rd for Open Up Kansas, and we'd have said, we got to open up this state. But now what the governor is doing is the governor is saying, well, let's just keep it going now till Labor Day. How many think Labor Day is the latest it's going to go? Does anybody really want to? Yeah, okay. Labor Day, and then, oh, well, it's October 1st, and before we know it, we're going to get to the first Tuesday in November, and they're going to milk this all the way to the election. So we have got to really, as Republicans, stand up for Kansas and tell them to shut this, to stop it. Stop it. It's hugely unconstitutional. We've been robbed of some of our First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights, and we need to stand strong as Republicans and as leaders and people that are leading the Republican Party. We need to stand up and do it right now.
Sarah.
Yes, thank you. No, and absolutely, it's not time to extend that unemployment benefit. I was the one candidate up here on the stage, or I guess in our chairs here, that was pretty vocal about opposing the latest COVID-19 stimulus package. And if you'll recall, we put a lot of pressure from our campaign and our team on Sharice Davids. And Sharice Davids joined 13 of the other vulnerable Democrats and actually voted for the first time in 499 days against Nancy Pelosi. That package included resources and funding to support states, liberal states like Illinois, California, New York, for mistakes unrelated to COVID-19. I think a lot of what she did and the result of her voting against that package resulted in the pressure that we applied. I think the focus going forward from a federal perspective needs to really be on our small businesses. I was meeting with a small business owner yesterday who is really hurting from the situation that we find ourselves in now from both a health and an economic perspective. And so the discussion, the dialogue needs to be focused on our small businesses, and that's where the attention of our federal leaders needs to be right now. Thank you.
Amanda.
Thanks. I concur with my colleagues here. I am definitely not in favor of spending more money at this point. Early on, I did see some of the investments that were made as a bridge as we move forward, and some of the investments I thought were important to help keep workers attached to small business so that people can continue to work while we're in a crisis situation. However, two things. First, I'm really concerned about the debt. As we move to the end of this year, and we've taken into consideration this recent spending, by the end of this year, we will be at $26.2 trillion in national debt. Many issues I look at from the perspective of being a mother. I mean, I'm concerned about the future of Madison and Dillon. And in this country, depending on how you look at the debt per taxpayer, you're talking about stacking roughly $170,000 on the back of a single taxpayer. And when you take into consideration other future unfunded liabilities, it can get as high as $700,000 depending on the estimates you look at. So I'm very, very concerned about the debt. I used the shutdown time period to spend a lot of time talking with families about the preservation of rights and liberties, and I spent a lot of time talking with businesses, not just about the right now, but the big turn that we need to make 12 to 18 months from now. I've been very, very vocal in saying that the turn needs to include focus on things like limiting liability for businesses. That's one of the biggest things that I've heard from small business, significant concern about liability. And then the other thing is, instead of spending a lot more money, I think it would be a great idea for the federal government to consider a payroll tax holiday. For those of us who have worked in business and paid the payroll tax, you know that that's a tax both on workers and on the employer. That's additional money that people can be keeping, their own hard-earned money. It's additional money that businesses could be keeping to reinvest and continue to hire and to continue to help people build skills. So, no to your question, and specifically because I have a growth mentality and it's not the right answer.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad we all agreed, but you all had a little different approach to the answer. Great. No more about it. All right, next question. While the federal government would not withhold public education funding entirely from public schools that don't reopen on time, that was announced the other day, they will not withhold money. Nancy DeVos said she would instead convert grants to schools and districts that don't open sufficiently into private education vouchers for families. Do you support education vouchers for families, and should public schools have funds diverted away from them if they are too restricted because of COVID?
That's some red meat. That's great, exactly. So you got to think about Betsy DeVos is probably the best education secretary we've had in probably my adult lifetime. She was a champion for vouchers and school choice in Michigan. Comes from the Amway fortune, and Donald Trump put her in. Boy, if Betsy DeVos can't pull this off, I don't know who can. So vouchers, yes. School choice, great. The Department of Education and the Teachers Union are huge, and they're very, very challenging. So one of the things that I think that we need to do, and this does tie to the previous question, federal payroll tax holiday is kind of a cool idea if you have a job, but a lot of people don't have jobs. So how are we going to balance the budget? How are we going to make some cuts? And so here we've got to start talking about what we're going to cut. One of the things I'd cut would be the Department of Education. I'd cut them by 1/3, clean out 1/3 of the desks, cut their budget by 1/3, and block grant it to the states and the school districts and the communities where the real educational move is made. Senator, that's why we've got to win the school board elections, because people talk about curriculum, reading, writing, and arithmetic. If you've read my newspaper, you know I'm huge on science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math for the future of our children and our grandchildren. And we're going to block grant some of that by way of infrastructure. Read all about it in the paper. You've heard me say that I've taken the term limits pledge, and I'm pledging my congressional salary to local charities and to science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math, because it's so important for the future of our children and grandchildren. So educational choice absolutely is hard to do. It's going to be very hard to do. It's going to take leadership, and Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump and Mike Beehler can provide that leadership.
Absolutely. Well, I actually have a master's in public policy focused on healthcare and education, and have actually been doing individualized education plans, IEPs, for the last 20 years. Many of you know that I have a best friend who happens to have Down syndrome. Started working with her, and that was my inspiration for getting involved in the disability community 20 years ago. One of my first jobs as a 19-year-old was to prepare her for her transition to Shawnee Mission West for high school. So over the years, I've done a lot in education policy, and in fact, when Secretary DeVos was sworn in as the education secretary, built a fantastic working relationship with her. I was one of a handful of leaders in the disability community to actually reach out to her and start to work with her. And so I'm a big advocate for school choice. And as it relates to the dialogue we're having at the federal, state, and local level, I really believe that the decision to educate our students, to open up our schools, has to be made at the local and the state level. Our teachers, our administrators, and most importantly, our parents know what's best for those students. I still talk to a number of the families that I've represented over the last 10 years at NDSS, and a lot of the students that are on IEPs, that are in special education programs, can't get into the schools and can't access distance learning and online learning. And so those decisions need to be made between the local school districts and the parents, and we need to get our schools open as quickly as possible.
Great.
Thank you. So to just first answer your question, I am absolutely in favor of parents having more control over how education dollars are spent specific to their kids. But I did want to just start, since the topic started is really about the shutdown, I wanted to comment, and schools reopening, I wanted to comment on that quickly. So my kids are 14 and 15 years old, so I lived through virtual learning with them, and certainly spent a lot of time, along with Alana Rayleigh, talking with a lot of mothers about the experience of virtual learning. And here's what I found, folks. A few things. One, parents feel like they are having to make a decision between working and or taking care of their child. Problem one. So that just doesn't help our economic situation. So that's a big one. Two, I found that a lot of parents who have children who in any way, shape, or form are sort of outside the spectrum of like the 80% normal, regardless of what that may be, that virtual learning was very difficult, did not work, and in many cases, there are parents who said, my kid is now going to be behind starting the school year, so I think that's a problem. And then three, so if some parents are worried about, am I going back to work or am I going to stay home with the child? Well, some families have enough money to figure that out, and there are plenty of families in America that don't. So you end up with children who are just left at home without guidance, already falling behind. So there is a really, really difficult and vicious cycle here that is not going to help our families and our economy. So I'm worried about it, and I'm absolutely a proponent of opening schools. I agree with the American Academy of Pediatrics that we need to do it, but certainly keeping in mind the safety of our children and our teachers. And you know, outside of that, just really quick, because I've got 15 seconds on education policy, my general view, and we won't get to all of it today, is that the education system needs to prepare our children for the workforce. And there are a lot of things that feed into that. Having hired a lot of young people and certainly having kids who I'm preparing for the workforce, but I'm out of time. So.
Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit from every one of these, but first of all, if we could get rid of the U.S. Department of Education, I would, but that's not practical. But what we have seen before is we have taken the U.S. Department of Agriculture out of Washington, D.C. and brought it to the Midwest. So I would definitely be for pulling that U.S. Department of Education out of Washington, D.C., bring it to Kansas City or somewhere Midwest. Local government is best, as well as local schools are should be making the decisions on opening or not one size fits all. And Amanda was correct in regards to the challenge of having children learn via Zoom. So we had 2 at home. We had 1 high schooler learning and 1 college student learning via Zoom. And to watch that, it was, you know, they go to school from 8:30 in the morning until 3:30, and they were done in like 3.5 hours. And so it was very concerning. But we also got to see the social emotional learning that is being taught to our children through the various subject matters. And so we really need to get our hands on that. I've also talked with many of our families here in Wyandotte County. And the only way that some families can get the internet is through their hotspot on their phone. Has anyone ever tried to get a hotspot with 3 or 2 computers? Good luck. And then if you only have 1 laptop, which child gets to learn today, right? And on top of that, we have to make a decision. Which one of us is going to go to work? Who gets to go to work? Who's going to be the breadwinner? And then how do we make up for that? So there are all kinds of challenges there, and there we are. Thank you. Sorry, my time's up.
Thank you very much. I noticed you said who gets to go to work and who has to stay home with the children.
5 boys.
Let's slip there. All right, next question. Given the literal mess of COVID created by China, what are your ideas on how to bring, first of all, manufacturing back, including our prescription drugs? And do you support sanctions or punitive action against China for their deceit regarding COVID-19?
Well, I think I've been pretty vocal in our TV ads and all the information that I've put out. First and foremost, we need to hold China accountable. There are a lot of ways that we can do that. Obviously, they've been deceitful. They've lied to not just the United States, but the entire world. And had we known about this sooner, we could have prevented the spread from even coming to our borders. I think President Trump has really done an excellent job of bringing together a fantastic team of experts, of scientists to really advise him and the Vice President on what needs to happen and what is happening, both from a health perspective, but also an economic perspective. I think the way that Secretary Mnuchin and the administration came together to put the PPP program out so we can pump those resources back into our economy has certainly helped. Obviously, we're leaning on Dr. Fauci and Dr. Bird on the healthcare perspective to make the necessary decisions both at the state, local, and the federal level. As it relates to China, I think what we need to do is start having more labels, more products made in the United States of America, and less labels as it relates to made in China. And we have to decouple our China and our United States economies and work on bringing those manufacturing jobs back to the United States, and not just back to this country, but back to Kansas. Senator Ron and I talked about this at length, but we have 1,000 manufacturing firms here in Wyandotte County. Those are jobs and those are opportunities for our high school students to graduate being career ready through our schools. That's certainly one way we can do it. As it relates to the drug manufacturing and the medical supplies, 90% of our antibiotics are manufactured in China. We need to be manufacturing those products here in the United States. And I think as somebody who has led on both a public health perspective, represented a patient advocacy organization, and cut across FDA, NIH, and CDC throughout my career, I'm uniquely positioned to lead on those issues for our district. Thank you.
Thanks. I have found probably, like most of these folks, walking door to door that, so China does come up frequently, and I think that there is broad support crossing this community, and it's my opinion as well, that we need to hold China accountable. Now, the challenge of that is that if we're going to do that as a country, this is going to be a long-term endeavor. So let me just go through a collection of things that we might need to think about. First, with regard to COVID-19, I absolutely believe that we need to continue to try and put pressure on China so that we have access to information. I know that most of the people in this room probably already believe that there's a lot that they didn't tell us that harmed the world ultimately, but we should continue putting the pressure on there. Second, I just want to comment really quickly on trade because I do think it matters in the midst of an economic crisis. So in the state of Kansas, I'm sure most of you are aware that I think our overall exports, it equates to about $9 billion. I want to say roughly 600 million of that goes to China. So if we are going to take steps, we do need to take into consideration we ourselves are selling products into China. We probably need to look at additional trade partners in Asia where we're going to expand and change the scope of our trade. If we're going to trade less than China. That could be more with India. It could be more trade with Japan. We've already got a free trade agreement with Australia. So our United States government really needs to explore that. In addition, if the U.S. is going to take on this challenge, we need to take into consideration things like our influence in international organizations needs to be stronger in some cases. The World Health Organization is clearly a good example of that. The Chinese infiltrated it. It was a problem. The president took some really good steps in terms of funding. The last thing that I'll say is our values that are focused on personal and economic freedom and our values, we value the dignity and rights of human beings. And that clearly stands in contrast to China. We need to continue to shine a light on Hong Kong and support an independent Taiwan. Like those things all really matter.
Well, my campaign team and I, we have knocked on over 17,000 doors. By Sunday night, we'll add another 2,000. And the number one issue that comes up that people are saying is we need to open up our economy. And when we talk about opening up our economy, we also talk hand in hand about China. And China never sleeps. They're never going away. They want to take over. They want to be number one. And so they're in it for the long haul, is what we say. They have been stealing our intellectual property, which is so hard to police. I saw firsthand when I worked for President Trump for the 14 months as the Region 7 advocate, working with our manufacturers in Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska, talking to them about trade and the tariffs and how it was impacting them and what more could we do to help them. And they said this: we hate paying the tariffs, but we understand them because 9 times out of 10, their intellectual property had been stolen. And so they get it. So I support President Trump in regards to him using tariffs as a trade tool, because it does work. But it's going to be tough for us too, because the longer we have this, the more pressure we put on China, the better. And the better we will be. And we do need to bring back manufacturing. One other thing, when COVID-19 happened, or the China virus is how I like to say it, is that a lot of my neighbors who were physicians and doctors and nurses said, hey, you need to stock up on zinc and magnesium. So if anyone tried to go and buy that at the CVS or anything like that, they couldn't find it. I go online, I order it, 90 days later and $62 later, I get it. Then, 90 days later, you can go and buy a bottle of zinc for 2 bottles for $5. I felt silly, but it's true, because it's coming over from China, and we've got to resolve that.
This is a huge question. China has a stated goal of being the world economic and military power by 2049. They're well on their way to doing it. When we were over here looking at Russia, and collusion in Ukraine and the COVID-19 crisis, they were in fact taking over Hong Kong and making it a one China. That is significant. We have to decide, are we going to use hard power, just sending the Marines to defend Taiwan, which I don't want to do, or soft power? What is soft power? Removing the permanent preferred trade partner status of China. It used to be called most favored nation trade status. Take that away. Use tariffs. Take them out of the World Trade Organization. Go down to the Australian, Southeast Asian, New Zealand partners that we have down there and say, we got to hit these Chinese because they're coming after you because you're right in their backyard. We need to go to NATO. We need to take them out of the World Trade Organization. We have got to use soft power with China pretty aggressively, or we're going to end up using hard power. And that's not a good thing with a nation of 1.4 billion people and the stated goal of 2049. On a happier note, how can we repatriate some of this manufacturing that's going on in China right here to Kansas City? How about that sunflower corridor out on that munitions plant? 9,000 acres plus, going from Gardner Edgerton, that's got a great master plan, all the way up to DeSoto, that's got their own strategic plan, and everything west of Olathe, and make that into the sunflower corridor, a sustainable, smart city where we use sustainable ideas for energy and water, and we build a place where people want to go work and play. I'm not sure if they're going to want to live there yet, because you know what we're cleaning up out there is asbestos and propellants for military weapons. It served us well in this country for decades, for many, many wars. But a great opportunity. I just spent 45 minutes last night on the virtual town hall talking about the Sunflower Corridor Task Force. Come join me.
Thank you. Good answers and all different. All right, one last question, I think that's what we're down to. Your friend, Representative Omar, I know you're all friends with her, right? She recently said, we can't stop at criminal justice reform or policing reform. You're not merely fighting to tear down the systems of oppression and criminal justice, we're fighting to tear down the systems of oppression and system housing, education, healthcare, employment, and the air we breathe. It is time to guarantee homes for all due to racial disparity. And it went on quite a lot beyond that. So my question to you is, how do you respond to this rhetoric, which I kind of already know, but how do you suggest that we as Republicans separate out and address the actual racism that does exist? I think,
Yeah, I do. I think that first, I just want to address, because it seems like we've been asked about it at every event, and again at the door as well. I want to talk about the defunding the police part of her, what she's referenced. I think that clearly this country is in a tough situation right now. Most of us, all of us in this room would say that some of the things that have occurred across the country are just abhorrent. I mean, they really are really troublesome. At the same time, I support our police officers. And as I said at the debate earlier this week, if you want to live in a thriving and vibrant community where people want to bring their family, grow their family, build businesses, one of the first things that people will look for is that it is a safe community and that there is a strong police force and that there's good quality education and other things that we all care about. So I think that's really important. I also want to make some comments about the Black community. There was a very, my daughter will be going to a Catholic all-girls high school, and I received a beautiful letter from the outgoing president of Pro Associated Student Body, who, by the way, was the first Black student to be the student body president. And she said something very simple about the Black community, and that was, stand with us. And when I hear stand with us, the way that I have tried to live my life is supporting Black businesses, supporting Black families. It's one of the major reasons why I founded Systems of Care Initiative to help young children in at-risk families. By the way, of the 80 kids that we're offering scholarships to in this community, 90% are either Hispanic or African American. We are making a real difference to make it easier for these kids to be successful in the future. And we're supporting and partnering with parents. It's about saying the community matters, and I care about my neighbors. We all need to do that.
Well, it is true, like Amanda said, we are hearing a lot and being asked about the civil unrest that we are hearing about today. And, you know, I support our constitutional right to protest, but what I don't support is the looting, the burning of our businesses, the blocking of highways for people to go freely to wherever they need to be. I think that is absolutely wrong. And defunding the police, that whole concept is ridiculous to me. My family all still lives here in Wyandotte County. I am honored and privileged to have two brothers, Dennis and Louis Vallejo, who are Kansas City, Kansas police officers. I have to correct, I also always say I have two nephews, and I do that are in law enforcement, but one just got to become a detective, Jacob, so I'm very proud of him. He also serves in Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, and I have tons of 21st cousins. I'm not exaggerating, they're all there. And so they put their lives on the line for us each and every day. They have a thankless job, and they get paid pennies, I do say that. And I support our police 100%. And it's just really unfathomable to think about how Sharice Davids and the Democrats want to, you know, at first it was ICE. They wanted to get rid of ICE. Now it's defunding the police. What next? Defunding the military? I don't think that's extreme. I think that is practical. I think that's what they're going after. I think Omar and Sharice and Nancy Pelosi want to take all of our liberties away because they believe that government is the best and that government is smarter than you and I, and they are completely wrong. And that's why it's important that we replace Sharice Davids, because she went from fighting in a boxing ring to fighting against our Kansas values in Washington, D.C.
When you talk about Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and people like that, and AOC, KC, our own version right here in Kansas City, you know, it makes it ever clear, especially when we turn on the television, this election's coming down to socialism versus free market capitalism. So the question you have to ask is who is best going to go against AOC, KC and represent free market capitalism and win this congressional seat and take the majority back for Republicans. You know, Martin Luther King said you judge the character of a man or a woman, you judge a man or a woman by the content of their character. And so I stand with Martin Luther King on that when we talk about racism. We judge a man or a woman on the content of their character. I was at an event and had an opportunity to get to know a middle-aged, more senior-aged African-American woman, and we had some conversations, and she knew I was running for Congress. I took a moment a few weeks ago and said, Priscilla, what's on your mind? Have you got 5 minutes? She goes, yeah. And so we start talking, and I said, what are you thinking? She goes, you know, it just doesn't change. What we're seeing on television right now, it hasn't changed from the 60s. And I said, yeah, like I'm thinking back when I was a kid, I saw fire hoses of people watering down African-American students trying to get into school and the National Guard. She goes, exactly, it hasn't changed. What's changed is the rapidity that we see it, the constant nature on television. We see it all the time. And you know what those Democrats do every 2 years? They use that and healthcare and the environment and Social Security. How many remember Al Gore putting your Social Security in a lockbox because those darn Republicans were going to take it from you every 2 years? And we fall into that trap, and we feel like we have to address that. No, what we have to address is how we're going to build this economy and make this country great again, just like the hat says over there, make America great again, again.
No, one of the things, and Barb, thank you for this question, that we have to do as we can't force these issues by just being silent. whether it's related to socialism, whether it's standing up to Omar on her treatment of Israel, or whether it's on the topic of conversation we have now in this country around defunding the police. We need a representative that's going to take the fight to Nancy Pelosi, that's going to stand up for freedom and capitalism and work on that every single day. This is exactly what I did as the CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society. I fought a current system where constantly, predominantly most of the leaders in the disability community are from the far left. They are your Bernie Sanders socialists. Your Elizabeth Warren, let's throw more money at the problem, throw more money at entitlement programs. And as we started to work forward and move forward and allow people with disabilities the right to save money, we forced this issue across Congress to allow people with disabilities to actually save their own resources in private sector 529 accounts. They were penalized for losing their benefits. And through our efforts and through our advocacy, we actually passed federal legislation that allowed people with disabilities and their families to provide their own American dream. The passage of the ABLE Act yielded the support of 85% of the entire Congress. We forced Democrats to come to the table and provide this private sector solution to a public sector problem. We got Bernie Sanders and Jim Jordan on the same bill, and when we passed that legislation with 85% of the entire Congress just 5.5 years ago, we had to take that fight to the states. We passed 49 state ABLE laws, allowing people with disabilities, their caregivers, and their families to save. And now, instead of that money coming out from your taxpayer funds and your bank accounts, we actually have over $400 million in ABLE accounts across 60,000 accounts. That's what we need to do as Republicans. We need to take the fight to the Democrats on these issues that are so radical coming from the far left.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm out of crazy questions, so I guess it's time to wrap it up. And we'll start with, is Adrienne, are you first this time?
Sure, yep.
Okay, you're up, and give you 2 minutes to say whatever you want. Final words.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank you for listening to us and having the opportunity. You know, Sharice Davids, it's going to be hard to unsee her, but we have to look at on August 4th or before, if you're doing advanced ballot, who can beat Sharice Davids in November? Who can take Democrat votes away from Sharice Davids? And the only candidate, I'm sorry to say everybody else, is me. Because I can take Democrat votes away from Sharice Davids. And for every Democrat vote we take away, that's 2 votes for us. Okay? It's very clear. Born and raised here in Wyandotte County. Highly Democratic. 1,224 first family members in Wyandotte County, JFK Democrats. They're coming over. They have friends, okay? We need a representative who's gonna have a strong voice, a strong backbone, someone who's not bought and paid for by special interest groups, someone who's not gonna go to DC to go along to get along. I am ready and willing to go to Washington, DC and fight for you each and every day and read your voice with your values of family, faith, and freedom. Thank you.
Let's do the math. This district is a Republican district. 38% Republican, 30% Independent, 30% Democrat, 2% other, Libertarians. You take the 38% Republican and the 30% Independents and we win. Now, why are people independent? They have been fed up with the Democratic Party and the socialism they see, and they say, I'm going to become an independent. I'm not so conservative that I want to become a Republican yet. Why did people leave the Republican Party? Disaffected Republicans. Disaffected perhaps over the abortion wars that we had. And by the way, we won. Thank you very much. But disaffected nonetheless, and their independence. How do we get the independence? I'm out walking my neighborhood, and I said, hey, I'm running for United States Congress, and I'm your neighbor. I'd love to have your vote. And I walked up to this couple. They were out for a walk. And I said, are you guys Republicans? And the guy goes, no, I'm an independent. And I go, oh, well, then you probably wouldn't be interested in this newspaper. He goes, you'd be surprised what I'd be interested in. And we Republicans might just be surprised what these independents are going to be interested in. But you know what they're going to be interested in? When they see tyranny in the streets, and our flag desecrated, and our churches spray painted, and our police officers are attacked, and the Constitution under constant attack, you know what they're going to be interested in? They're going to be interested in safety and security. You know, if they don't have a job, or they're getting so much money that they don't go back to their job, they're going to want a job back. That's what they're going to want. Those independents are going to vote for Donald Trump for president. They are going to vote for our senatorial candidate. They will vote for Mike Beehler as well when we show them a vision for the future of safety and security and jobs, jobs, jobs. What did they used to tell Bill Clinton? It's all about the economy, and that's what we need to focus on. So with my engineering experience, successful business experience, 40 years of creating jobs, thousands of jobs across America, and right here in Kansas, it's just what the doctor ordered.
My leadership philosophy has always been, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Well, folks, this congressional district is not at the table in Washington under Sharice Davids. We know she votes with Nancy Pelosi 97% of the time. She's an empty suit for the Democrats. And this district, as I said earlier, has been hijacked by California and New York City liberals, and I'm ready to change that. Lynn Jenkins, who's chairing my campaign, said this early on. Think about it. Who is the last person you would want, Nancy Pelosi would want to run against her best friend, Sharice Davids? Nancy Pelosi's worst nightmare. Somebody who's a political outsider, who has no political baggage. A proven CEO who's actually run an organization, a multi-million-dollar organization. Somebody who has led on conservative health care and conservative tax reform, and who has gotten things done in Washington without a member pin and two hands tied behind my back. Somebody who actually grew up here. I'm a proud product of our Kansas schools. This is my community, and this is where I'm from. So folks, if you want to beat Sharice Davids, and your goal is the same as mine this November, then I'm your candidate. I guarantee nobody will work harder, nobody will show up early, work late, and deliver for you and lead on our conservative values than I will. And I would be deeply honored and humbled to earn your vote on August 4th, to work alongside you to defeat Sharice Davids in November, and to lead on our conservative Kansas values in Washington. So thank you.
So I'm gonna make you all happy and be really quick here, because I have to speak to another group in Overland Park in about 15 minutes. I think that the most important thing in this election cycle, people have asked me multiple times, what's the win factor of that? We are in the midst of an economic and healthcare crisis. I have really deep experience, 15, 20 years crossing both business and healthcare. I'm just going to leave you with a couple parting thoughts, and that is, if you haven't seen it, I have actually released some deep policy ideas on our path back to prosperity. They're on my website at AmandaAdkins2020.com. There's also a lot on there related to healthcare too, COVID and onward. I, as a result of the fact that I do have a lot of experience, that my experience is very relevant in business and politics and in healthcare, that I've had impact in this community, that I am an ideas champion. I was really fortunate that Ted Cruz, I should have mentioned it earlier, endorsed me early on. And he not only endorsed me, but he said, Amanda, I'm really going to invest in you. I'm only investing in 20 leaders this cycle. And he said it's Ted Cruz's 20 and 20. So he's opening up his former presidential donor base and asking those people to be supportive of me as a candidate, because the people he selected, he believes, will lead this country into the future. So I've had a lot of different people who've supported me, but that one I just happen to be really proud of because it's very personal to me. Last thing before and I apologize, ladies, before I run out the door, I did want to say that both Alana and Stasia will be here for a little while. Alana actually leads my Women for Amanda effort, so much as you have interest. Stasia and I, you see, we are going to be hitting the streets here in about a couple hours. We're in the girl car together. So if you have any questions or need anything, please feel free to talk with them. And again, I'm really sorry, but I have to run as I pull Bart.
This is our forum. We want to thank the candidates so much, even the one that's gone. I'm so glad you could come. It was an excellent